social work academic and currently the principal of Nazareth College of Arts and Science, Chennai. I'm extremely honored and thank Professor Sanjay Bhatt, President of NIPSWI, for giving me the opportunity to host the fourth conversation in the series. This is the fourth session, and the topic is strength-based social work practice. The intention is to ask the expert about the efficiency of strength-based social work practice in post-corona times. The speaker is well known to us in India, Dr. Venkat Pilla. He is a foundation professor of strength-based social work practice, Brisbane Institute of Strengths, Australia. And he has been writing on strength-based practice since 2005 and has been a leading figure in global conferences. He began his career at the now Rhoda Mystery College of Social Work in Hyderabad, Telangana in the year 1977, and later moved to take up the headship of the School of Social Work in Darwin, Australia in the year 1993. He has taught other universities in Australia, and since strength-based practice and grounded theory and teaching research writing from scratch to academics are his passion. Dr. Venkat is an alumni of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and NAPSWI is proud to have honored him with the Lifetime Achiever Award in the year 2015. He is a prolific writer, editor, and seriously a great mentor and a peer mentor to several of us now teaching in social work. Ladies and gentlemen, the session I am anticipating will last for an hour or more, and we will take up some of your questions and comments across the globe. On behalf of NAPSWI and Social Work Fraternity of India, I welcome Dr. Venkat Pilla to share your thoughts on the topic, strength-based social work practice in post-corona times. According to the Worldometer update, thank you, sir. According to the Worldometer update today, 30th May, India's count of COVID-19 cases has risen to 1,73,763 cases. A total of 4,980 people have lost their lives due to the infection, and over 50,000 cases have been reported in the last 9 days itself. Among all the states, Maharashtra has the highest number of coronavirus cases, and for over 100 days, we have been battling COVID-19 around the world. COVID-19 has occupied all dimensions of our life, and it continues to impact more individuals and communities in all the countries, irrespective of gender, class, caste, religion, or country. Every country is passing a difficult time now, every day on earth. The front lines of promotive, preventive, and treatment services to ensure health and well-being of the people in all the countries are also living in fear. In social work practice, we teach working with individuals, group, and communities. Pre-COVID-19, we seem to have got along with these methods reasonably okay. We have no restrictions. It appears that post-COVID-19 with the new normal seems to challenge us all. Working from home for some time, issues around the physical distancing, not knowing how long we will be in this sort of a limbo, and hearing masks or moving cautiously. A few questions cross our minds. Will we be able to work with individuals? What kind of groups are we going to work in the future? What type of communities do we have to work with? What happens in the social action arena? And how will social work research look like? If you permit me, sir, there will always remain many questions in this conversation today. But to begin with, so for the benefit of you viewers, could you give us a short view of what strength-based practice is and what is the philosophy behind the strength-based approach?
Thank you, Mary, for asking that question. But before that, you have already loaded a few questions in terms of Will we be able to work with individuals, groups, and what will be the communities, and whether we will ever be able to do some social action? Of course, you will be able to work with individuals. So that's a positive. You will be able to work with groups. That's another positive. There will be communities, there will be social action. Things will be different, but your work will continue. So that's a big positive as far as social work is concerned. Now, I know that you've also asked me to explain what is the strength-based practice all about. And essentially, uh, when we use the word strength-based practice in social work, we are talking about the individual or the group or the community's capacities, their intellectual skills, their physical skills, their interpersonal skills, and their capacities. And we premise strength-based approach in social work with some fundamental um, notions. That is, all people have strengths and capacities. People can change, people will change, and people will always look forward to changing from one state to the other. People change and grow through their strengths and capacities. And one thing which sometimes probably hurts some of us who consider ourselves to be experts in the whole process of doing social change, we consider ourselves experts, but I want you to start recognizing that people are their own experts, at least on their own problem. And one of the most important things that we start in strength based practice is we start asking questions in a way which provide us provide us some understanding as to what their family is, what their extended family is, who their colleagues are, who their neighbors are, what kind of material resources they possess, what kind of physical resources that they possess. And of course, some of those things are the ones with which we want to reconstruct their lives, and we want to make sure that people move from one stage to the other. So, in all of that, I think the strength based approach, in a way, is basically built upon positive attitude about people's dignity, about people's capacities. It's about a human rights approach. It kind of understands the uniqueness and commonalities between them and us as human beings. So it tries to create, in a way, conditions that will enable individuals to show change, to move towards their future life in a more positively. I think that should basically be the form of an initial explanation for the strength-based practices as it is. And I think one of the things that we generally tend to do understand is that people always aspire to become something. People always look forward to move ahead and plan their life, and they're always looking forward to grow better. I use the word people instead of clients. You might have noticed that people that we work with. Of course, some people like to use the word clients itself, and I prefer people because it is an amalgam. It shows, a greater, probably doesn't show the kind of labeling that even goes with the word client. And I mean, strength-based practice is a kind of a practice where we create those conditions for change in people. We would like to see uh, and mobilize individual strengths across the change continuum. And we work with the aspirations of people, we work with their dreams, we work with their interests and concerns. And of course, we value them, and we want people to value themselves. And I think that should basically give you a bit of an idea as to where the strength-based practice is, uh, you know, heading towards. And we will probably take on um, a few more aspects of strength-based practices as we move towards. One of the things that I also need to mention is that uh, the language that we use in strength-based practices is different from the the traditional language that we generally see in in various helping professions. In fact, Western world, of course, does not any longer start calling people as the disabled or people who are retards or mental retardation and things like that. We generally tend to use the word people with a disability, families with a client with a disability. These are the kind of words that make a big difference. And they do not pathologize people. They define We do not define what is possible for them. We just leave it. And we also do not control them, and we do not also want to create any passive difference, a passive dependence on ourselves. The other thing that we don't do is we don't blame people for whatever has happened. We want them to take responsibility rather than we going ahead and blaming them. So I don't also suggest that we frame people as if they are resistant, uncooperative. These are not the kind of words that we would generally tend to use. And we also don't assume that we have got all the solutions as experts. So these are some of the basic things which I understand are the ones which would relate to the strength-based practice. Yes, Mary.
Venkat sir, I can see that people use their own expertise and have a good understanding. For
Yeah,
example, the understanding of wearing a mask.
yeah.
There are a group of people who continue to accept the norm as it is and wear the mask and move
Mhm.
on with their day to day activities. They see their strengths in the process of wearing the mask. Well, there are a whole lot of people who think that it doesn't matter much and probably will not accept the norm. What do we do with these people?
Well, you see, one of those, I mean, it's both, it's technically loaded. It's more a scientific kind of a thing that you are talking about people's beliefs. People who believe that, they are safe and they move on. They believe that they've got huge immunities, and people who believe that, it doesn't work for them. It's, what could you do? You've got in America, the entire country goes and, you know, starts doing mass graves, and you've got President Trump who doesn't wear a mask even in any of his official meetings and everything else, and he says, I don't like it and I don't use it. So it's become it's an issue now. I'm not too sure whether you would take a huge confrontation issue around that, or you take and you start disciplining people that they don't wear masks. But what would happen, of course, is associated with the level of education of people, and the way you probably could think in terms of letting them know what it is all about, that they are going to save themselves, not just you. So if they're concerned about themselves, they would probably be using. And I am, those sort of obstinate characters is not just one thing that you would find in overcrowded Indian cities. We find them everywhere. We found them in Australia too. And there are a whole lot of people who don't believe that the scientists, and too many of them, like social scientists, too many of them too, are saying the truth. We don't know where we are heading. So there is this disbelief at one end, there is fear, there is anger, there is this simple protest. You see, what is democracy all about? What does it give us? It gives us dissent, a right to be different. And I'm not going to be, um, wasting my time with all those people who move away. But what I'm going to do is give more information and let them make those decisions. And if that is the only issue at this point of time, mask or no mask, I mean, that's one aspect of it. Basically, it all started off with the lockdown. I think it is lockdown. There are unintended consequences of this lockdown. We just said, stay at home, you'll be safe. Then they said, you wear a mask. And then said, we found that there were not many masks available in any society. Then we started importing, people started making, people started, everywhere, whether it's Facebook or anywhere, you always find how to make a mask. It became a huge occupation for a whole lot of people. So it's a novel way of dealing with a particular crisis. We have not got into this yet. And you know even in a country like United States, where so many people have passed away, they'll say, well, it happened in New York, it didn't happen in San Francisco, it didn't happen in rural area, I haven't been touched yet. So it's that kind of feeling, I guess, that is basically moving on with people. Yes, Mary?
Sir, at this point of time in the Indian scenario, we see a lot of problems that have been reported, discussed, and criticized in the news every day, both in print and visual media. So, the issue of migrant laborers. Ram Kumar Pandit, a construction worker who became a snapshot of India's migrant tragedy, it was reported in one of the articles in the Hindu how a migrant worker reacted in this situation. हम मजदूरों का कोई देश नहीं होता. We laborers don't belong to any country. What, according to you, is happening to the migrants?
Yes, this is a very sorry state of affairs. It's not just migrant issue in India that a whole lot of rural migrants go to the cities to build those cities. It is migrants in European Union from one country to the other. It is migrants from rural migrants into urban areas in any parts of the world. But basically, it's about migrants, it's about temporary citizens, and it's about various humanitarian ways and means by which they all ought to have been cared for. Unfortunately, I think one of the things that people tend to hit when we see situations like this is citizen versus non citizenship, and who is a citizen. For instance, the person who stays in Dharavi slum or in Bangalore slum, who happens to be a city person, vis-a-vis somebody who comes from let us say, from Delhi or from Uttar Pradesh, a migrant. He is a migrant, but the one who settled down in the slum, who also could be part of the labor force, is a citizen. So there's a little bit of difference that you would find, even though both are marginalized. One has a hutment to live, one has a ghetto type of living in the urban areas, and the other one probably be living in sheds, or we do not know what has been the arrangements. I think this is a huge reality that has come about, which is connected with the globalization, which is connected with the way in which economic structures have been built about and economic development has been thought about, and the way in which cities have gone into. I have obviously heard about Rampukhar Pandit, the construction worker, who talks about the way he did. And I know he was talking to on a telephone. It was a telephone message, probably to his family, because he couldn't attend. He didn't have the train or bus or something or the other in order to go and see his family. And of course, someone has passed away in his family. But that's a kind of, it's not just one off. There are these kind of challenges that we get in crises. We get them in outbreaks, we get them in epidemics, and we also get them in these pandemics. There's something to learn from this, that is, essentially, we need to look at what is happening and how can we uh, a mitigate the situation, do if we can to immediately go into, when it comes down to rescue and crisis, we already have methodologies through which we can do it. So that's one of those things that we probably need to do. And I think India is trying its best. At some point of time, we anticipate that some sense will prevail, and that there will be federal and the state governments which will all work like a national government and will think in terms of, we've got a situation. This is not a kind of a we are in a pickle, and all we need to do is solve the solution. We got to find a solution, and we can't be politicking about it for what it is worth. So it's the same thing happening in UK. You've got some minister who goes away, but you've got New Zealand, which tells you that if a minister has basically, done a something, he has done something bad, the Prime Minister of New Zealand has actually sent him back to his own barracks. In other words, she said, no, you're not going to be a minister. So in other countries, people do see punishment as a result of things which go wrong. And of course, this is what the migrant labor issue that you're talking about is. In the last 20, 25 years, I don't think anybody has ever noticed it. So it's being noticed. We will talk about it as we progress in this, and I'm quite sure we will, closer to social action and social research, we will try to find some solution for that.
Yes, sir. Sir, it looks to be that we need to gain a holistic understanding of the problem. You are
Yes.
suggesting we must begin with the needs assessment, work out what the needs are, and we will know what needs to be done. Can you help us understand this with a brief on the deficit cycles?
Okay. So you want me to, okay, understand what would be the way to look at deficits vis-a-vis the needs. Okay.
Yes, sir.
What happens is, um, let's assume I mean, at this point of time, this is all hypothesis. You've got migrants at some point of time. I hope there will be some sense somewhere and they'll be able to go from one place to the other. But basically, they want to go back to their home. Let's assume they go back, and let's assume that some people would like to take an opportunity to think in terms of returning, because at some point of time they need to yeah, return to the places where the economy is, and they got to work their life through. The other way, and if they don't, the current experience that they have, that they work so much for the city, they work for you and me in the city, and when a crisis came up, we didn't care for them. That negative experience might actually not allow them to move back from their rural areas back to Bangalore or back to Delhi. I see that one negative experience can also result in an opportunity that can be blocked. An opportunity in the sense trying the same job again. The other way around of looking at is that when some of these opportunities are blocked for them, and if they don't have skills to go somewhere else, it also results in additional negative expectations. And and then of course then they start looking at themselves as, look, we are poor, whether we were rural or whether we are urban. That's one thing. We are marginalized. We are Dalits, the kind of word that sometimes they use in case they are from the caste communities. Now, and being rural, being poor, being marginalized, being in that kind of a state of mind, they tend to think in terms of as people who are deficient, and the deficiencies will result in further marginalization, further impoverishment, and further into a stage where we also use in psychology what is called learned helplessness. So it becomes those difficulties through which they just don't come out. And with those difficulties, negative behaviors start coming up. I'm not too sure that everybody in poverty must become, must be associated with crime. Everybody in marginalized person who doesn't have, a day-to-day food would go and steal or something or the other. But yes, we know that the incomes, marginalization, poverty, not having food to eat, not having care plans around their lives, not having social security in a country like ours, can make them rebellious. They might start thinking in terms of that the country doesn't care and it's not worth it. And of course, you need to be thinking in the country. Politicians must think, public administration must think. In a country like India, where most of the adult franchise takes place with people in people in slums and people who are in rural poor, who are the ones who vote for them, they probably will not go at all. There will be protests. They don't give a damn whether which government is there. They'll find their own solutions. They will lower their expectations and they'll take up something or the other as an alternative. It's a sad thing, and that's not the way one should be thinking in terms of. So the deficit cycle, once you get into deficit cycle, it results in depression. It results in situations which you shouldn't be, and it has various ramifications, and that's a rather sad thing for us to be talking about, and we need to be getting these people out of that. And people do talk about, we are still a caste society, we do have various other issues in rural areas, and yes, that's exactly where social work needs to be pitching itself to. Where is social work in relation to caste? You only work around, you're not in race, you're not in caste. You're working with people with disabilities, you're working with mental health, you're working in PMIR, you're working in all those areas which are easier for you to do. There isn't much of work that you could see. So that's a new emerging area that we could think about for social work, that is to influence um, and ensure that those value systems of caste and class and other things are influenced better in the country. And particularly even racism, you look at Northeasterners and versus versus the rest of the country. When this entire thing about COVID came down, so many of those Mongoloid races who are in the Northeast India, who very much probably look like Chinese people. I mean, almost a quarter of our country looks like that in India. And so, what was the behavior of the urbanites towards them? They were casting them out like Wuhan virus. That's a sad thing to do. So we need to be working on all these things, and that's a big agenda as far as future social work is concerned, that we need to be attacking caste, class, and other major issues.
Sir, if hope develops and change occurs when the question arises, what do we do next? What is the meaning of resolution focused practice in social work? Can you please highlight on the focused practice, please?
Oh, that's a that's a very loaded question. Okay, uh, it is pretty very loaded question, and I would try and see how probably I could look at resolutions. Maybe I could actually do something right now with you guys, because there is a little bit of engagement which is also happening simultaneously here. And so one of the things that I want to write to everybody, that's what I've written here, is you need to ask people who are in crisis, including your the migrant labor about whom you started off. The question actually is, if they have already moved from a stage of, from a problem situation to somewhere else, and you're going to be working with them and you want to resolve their problem, it would be, you need to ask them what has worked with you for you before, what does not work for you. In other words, you want to know what exactly is happening there, what might work in the present situation for you. These three questions allow facilitators, that's basically social workers, and people that they serve, that is clients, to make important changes in the processes and goals of engagement. So as workers, we are understuck when when a client changes and he blossoms. People pick up their bits and pieces and they start their life again. All these people who are going away to rural areas, in fact, three or four of our academics at this point of time, along with me, are actually planning to do a study, including videographing, on their journey in India, as they move on, what happens to them when they finally go to 24 Parganas in Calcutta. What happens in those districts? How will how will their families receive them? And after that, how will their days actually start off? So, resolution focused practice that you use the word is concerned as to how solutions work rather than how problems have worked. That's the first basic thing that I want to talk about. And we want to also identify simultaneously what needs to be different, in that situation. You also want to identify what strengths that they have got. What Knowing what will be different when the problem is absent is more important than understanding their causes. You know, these are migrant labor. They've moved away. They've gone, let's say, they've gone to a village. Now, what you're going to ask them about is not about what happened backwards, but about the future. It's more useful to focus on what people will be doing when the problem is absent. And what is the current problem? The current problem would be to find a job. Current problem would be to find food for the next 2 or 3 days. You wouldn't have the solution straight away. You're going to ask them, okay, so what are you doing? So you don't have to, in strength based practices, take it for granted that in a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that you are going to be involved in every aspect of it. You got to get you start getting some work from the person whom you are trying to help out, and you're going to work with them in such a way that you try to identify their story, you try to understand from them, and you develop a picture of the future. What should be the future? And that person might start telling you, I would like to see that I'm able to feed my wife and my 2 children in the rural area itself if I can do that. Developing a picture of the future is very, very important for him. Identify the resources which are required. I'm quite sure the government will have a scheme. Maybe there's a local NGO that might have a scheme. The Panchayati Raj or the local administration might have a scheme. You tap into all those things. And of course, you also tap into yourself. You are a resource. You're surely an expert. You learned behavior sciences. You learned social sciences. You have a social work degree. So you add all these things, your strengths, their strengths, the system's strengths, and the neighborhood, what those things are. And once you have them all, it will be possible for you to build the client and build a future for them. And as I said before, it's important for us to at the same time consider the foundations of strength-based practice. And strength-based practice is to let your client self-determine what he needs to do. It's about getting some power from various places and sharing that power with your client. It's, of course, having a good regard for human rights. It's a regard for the common good. It's about inclusion and participation in a way. It's about collaboration and partnership. Your first questions, which you've had, I'm still having them in my front, written
Yeah,
down. Whether we will ever have groups, of course you will have groups. Whether we will
yeah,
ever have community organization, you will always have community organization. The degree will
yeah,
be, there will be a different way by which you would deal with it. Transparency. No more, previous to COVID, maybe there was a little less transparency. After COVID, he's going to ask you, what are you going to do with me? No, no, no. You're urbanite, you're educated. You already did not provide me a solution when I was in your city. That's how he's going to talk to you. So you need to be thinking in terms of how do we, as a system, with social workers, with resource systems and everything else, think in terms of meeting the needs of these people. There are, of course, ways by which we can go on. And the sharing of resources, the skills, the knowledge, the decision making, everything will have to move towards the people themselves. Once that, I mean, that is the bottom line as far as strength-based practices is concerned. And you need to understand that it's not that easy to do strength-based practices, because we need to lose, we are bound to lose a certain amount of power around our own expertise and our own resources. Because one thing is certain, actually, in losing our power, he gets more power, the client or the community. And once they get it, we can move on. We can move on to some other place, some other activity. We're going to be in business. Social workers is going to be a booming business in its own way.
Sir, we
Yes,
have spoken. You have spoken to us on the deficit cycle, and we have also highlighted on the resolution-focused practice in strength-based approach. My question would be, for the benefit of all the social workers viewing the series, can you please tell us how social worker can practice a strength-based approach?
I think basically you need to get, whether you're working with individuals, whether you're working with a group, whether you're working with the system, you need to focus on what is it that they do well. What do you do well is the first question. What are your skills and interests is the second question. And what happened when difficulties arose in the previous life of yours, which is basically the, with the migrants, they have relatively immediate memory. They can tell you all that has happened. And when these difficulties arose, let us assume that these difficulties, when these difficulties arose, there was a different type of a life that you're talking about. If things were to be better, how would they look like? A person probably will start imagining at that point of time. You need to reimagine even your own role in social work. And you also need to allow the clients to reimagine that life is there after all. You've said, Mary, you want to build action and you know you want to build active hope amongst people. You could do that provided he moves from one stage to the other very slightly better. Today, in uncertainty, and uncertainty with marginalized living, with impoverishment, with the way he is, not knowing where his family is going to be different from an uncertainty when he is with the family and he needs to find a food for them. But at least he's got one security. He's gone back to his family. He's gone back to his roots. He could see his children and family is happy. No time in the world, nowhere in the world, and no time in the world we have stressed the importance of family as much as we do at this point of time. People, irrespective of the physical distancing and everything else that you talk about, if there is one thing that they have gone that has worked out in this, it brought families into a better communication. An opportunity has been given to everybody within the family to communicate. Of course, people talk about in the Western world, domestic violence came up, mental health came up. I mean, we have to buy it too. So that means we were escaping. So therefore, we were distancing ourselves. And we have now a challenge of going back and not escaping, so that we will have to worry about those issues, and we will have to be thinking about what we need to do. The next thing is, are there times when the problem is not there? So in other words, you're going to ask these people, when were you happy last time, or last Diwali? What happened? I had, so many things around me. Well, is that something that you look forward to? Yes. Would you have some plans at this point of time to move on to? In other words, you are going to work with people in in nearly hopeless situation, but talking about there is a tomorrow, there is some working to be done, there is a possibility, and one such possibility, if you make one step towards that possibility, So, in other words, take that one single impossible step towards that possibility. There is everything that you might actually manage to get through. So, that's the way to go. What do you think other people consider your strengths at the moment? You're still strong. You left Calcutta, you went to Bangalore, and you came back walking. You're still strong, not physically, but even mentally. What do people think? Then he starts talking about himself. You encourage him. You're not telling him that you're a strong person. You encourage him to think about it. How did you beat some of your problems in the past? Have you had challenges before? And what were those challenges? How did you go about those challenges? So these questions will generate a response in him, and that response will lead to an opportunity, a possibility, a reasonably positive way of looking at the future.
Yeah.
And that's all as far as strength-based practice, the kind of questions that you need to do. I know
Okay.
what I'm doing is in a half an hour is something that I take 2 days to teach, and I have about 16 PowerPoint slides that I generally use. But that's another story, another time. We've got just in about half an hour. We are trying to work out what we could and what we could get through some of these things.
So, Venkat sir, now
Yes.
we now sort of understand what strength-based practice can be used by social workers. Can you help us to better understand with a practice example on the present issue of migrant labor in India?
Yes. Good question. With migrant labor issue, which obviously takes us a little more than just doing counseling, it's not an issue of counseling a migrant labor and asking him, utilizing strength-based practice. I think you need strength-based practice, subversive social work, social policy direction, and a real macro level work as well in the country. And social work needs to lead in this arena. I see that the migrant issue has possibly been there for the last 20 years or so in the country, or 25 years, I would not know. But while some social workers and some NGOs have always had the opportunity of starting kindergartens and children's schools around construction labor work, but that is an ameliorative kind of a solution. I have a feeling that social workers, social scientists, architects, regional planners, the government, everybody needs to think in terms of what were the two main issues in COVID that they were talking about. One was don't come so close. And what is it that we see in cities? Overcrowding. So, what's the alternative? Smaller cities, regional development, more rural markets, more new rural skills, more new plans. I don't know, which prime minister's name you will take and make a plan, but make a plan. Make a plan on yourself, make a plan on anybody's name. Make a plan where the migrant labor is in a position to possibly go back, and if at all, if he has to venture, he takes those baby steps. He comes out from the village, but he comes to a rural town. He comes out from the town to a smaller city. He comes out from the smaller city to a slightly bigger city. But he doesn't have to be thrown away right from Calcutta rural villages to Bangalore or Hyderabad or Cochin. That kind of distance is meaningless. Second thing, social work in a strength-based social research needs to also look at, for God's sake, when there is work in Kerala, when there is work in Bangalore, why should a Bangalorean labor go so far? Why should a Calcutta labor come this far? I think we need to get into the nexus of those contractors, that hegemony out there. There's a real need for both subversive as well as social action that needs to be done to see that those kind of pockets of power need to be infiltrated. Social work has a new definition out there. Social work would obviously need to be moving in terms of uh, working with migrants at different levels, and probably also work towards a little more sanity around the law, make sure that there is a little more integrity into the whole process, and ensure that people have food at the end of the day. And I have also followed, as you were talking before, I tried to read up a little bit. I think tomorrow or day after, I don't know, there's going to be some one ration card to be given away in this country. And people seem to be perceiving problems. Man will be in Bangalore, women and children will be in Calcutta. How is one
Yeah,
ration card possible?
possible.
Come on, you make the ration card possible. If he goes back, there will be four people there. Have four people there. It doesn't matter. Give them only three people ration. And in the city, give him a single card. It's still the same thing. Identity card. It's the same thing. You you make hue and cry. You make a political issue. If social workers do not enter into politics and talk sense into that, there is no way that you could get any influence at all. One of the things that I notice is that social workers everywhere are not that shy. I think Indian social workers seem to be shy. They seem to be thinking in terms of, the government didn't invite us in COVID. COVID isn't a COVID isn't a wedding that you need to be invited. You need to push yourself. You need to say who you are.
Right.
You haven't felt it because you're still thinking, how do I do field work at this point of time? How do I let my field practice go on? How do I do this? How do I do that? Innovation, creativity, change. These are the three important words by which social work needs to engage in future. I'll go back to you those four questions that you have said before. Will we work with individuals? Of course, we will work with individuals. Maybe with a mask or without a mask, it doesn't matter, 2 meters difference or this sort of a thing. People will not lose that intimacy. Today, we're using what we are using. This entire technology that has been a gift for the last 10 years. Celebrate it, count it as a blessing. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Everybody would have heard that in their schools. Beautiful hymn. What does that mean? It just means that we need to be thinking in terms of positives, move on. We need to hang on. We need to listen to the government. They've got some purpose. Economic development possibly is something that bogey will always run it in front of you. They will say you're going into the doomsday. They will tell you everything is going to crash. You wouldn't have anything at all. This is the way people will start telling you. I can tell you one thing, government tell so many things, but people do what their thought process is, what their heart says so. Social work is a profession with heart. Don't put it in your back pocket. Let that heart jibe. Let that heart rule your mind. Don't lose your heart. There's an opportunity. After COVID, pre COVID, vaccine, no vaccine, life will go on. There isn't going to be a doomsday. Yes, some societies have unfortunately lost a lot of people because of arrogance of the system, because of economic ways by which people have talked about. We have we have some barbers in our country, very big saloons. They said he's not going to touch anybody's head for quite some time. He closed it down. The simple reason? He says, look, I don't want my workers to be exposed to COVID. Life is important. Life is really important. And I want you to understand, and that is the main crux at the end of the day in strength based practice. We want to make sure that people have an opportunity to live with dignity, to cope well, to become resilient, and then become, they become their own messiahs. They become their own hope. They spread active hope, irrespective of whatever has happened. It's important at the end of the day, whether we are talking about school teachers, whether we are talking in terms of social workers, all of us have a role to play. I think as care workers, all of us, even if somebody didn't ask us, somebody hasn't actually done, the drums and the pots and pans and everything else, you need to go out and tell them that you care. You need to show that you care, and you also need to care. Both are important. In teaching, it is important that you work through the lessons in a little more creatively. What do I do? How do I go about? In Kerala, somebody told me that schools were closed. So what happens to the midday meal? Midday meal was sent home in newspaper packets. Now that is commitment. So you need to have commitment. You need to have values. It goes a long way in ensuring those issues. If you ensure that those smaller issues are also taken care of. People started thinking in terms of, in the entire Maslow's hierarchy of needs, social workers always work with the mental health issues, the disabilities issues, and various other kind of things. That's not true. When pandemics came, when cyclones came, in my own life, along with and what was called National Services Scheme, boys and girls, many, many moons ago, we went to cyclones, we went to those areas. We had to do, we had to bury, and we also had to, burn some dead bodies. So I wasn't skilled for that. I will not ask for those kind of skills. So those are natural skills that we would get. So there's nothing in an emergency that tries to, there is no standard definition of a social worker. On the contrary, you have a bigger role of trying to understand why all those care workers, what is their trauma? They see it all. What happens to all those nurses? Who's counseling them? What happens to all those doctors? Who's counseling them? What happens to all those municipal workers that you have got who are cleaning every day, everything? And when do we thank them? Thank them only when the prime minister or somebody tells us to thank them. What dignity have we given them? So we need to think in terms of, I think for once, this pandemic has made us all to rethink what social work is. In all humility, I would suggest that we rethink social work. We have a great role to play, and we will have a great role to play. We will move into distance education. That's going to be everything. But distance education doesn't mean that you will not have people listening to you. I know for sure now that I'm able to communicate, but probably I will communicate and demonstrate in 2 days' time in my training programs. In 2 days' time, I make everybody a strength-based practitioner. They would be change. That's the way I do it here. but I could also do some semblance, some possibility. I can leave a possibility that one can be motivated even in distance from distance. So you use this medium, which is good, which is wonderful. The governments are doing it, everybody else is doing it. And look at every program that you have got. This, programs of poverty lines that you have got, programs that you have got for, to move people up from poverty line to above poverty line. Don't debate that some people didn't move, some people moved. The nagging, the niggles, the concerns, the everyday problems that you tend to see, look at it. Well, something is being done. Move on. If you get stuck, and if you want to remain stuck, and that will be the only mode in which you can be. And migrant labor issue is very, very big. You need to completely go inside that. Think about your personnel management, industry relations students. Think about social work researchers. Start walking with them. Slowly things are moving. Find out where they are going. What is their life? Social work, 500 schools or 500 or 600 schools that you have got throughout the country are all dispersed in different places. You need to move. You need to talk. And that's the only way that you could basically ensure that people don't die during their journey and people don't deliver babies on the road and then still carry those babies until somebody else sees. It is pathetic. The truth, we do not want your country, my country of birth, or any country to become a laughing stock at the end of the day that we do not celebrate life. I think that's the message that's very, very important for all of us. We need to
So,
value human life. Yes.
so from what you have shared, there are two things that really matter to every social worker. Life is important, and social workers have to work with your heart. So we have seen an overview of the principal process and sharing power. Could you lead us how a social worker can find the strengths and exceptions?
In from a, I think I did talk about how to find strengths in an individual. I mean, when you want to find strengths when an individual or a group or a community is in crisis, the way you are trying to do is, I mean, I'm not suggesting that you don't recognize the crisis. You do recognize the crisis. What needs to be given during the crisis is something that you will do, like whether it is food, whether it is shelter, something or the other. But having dealt with some of those early needs in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you probably need to think in terms of how do I go about ensuring that whatever has occurred at this point of time doesn't really occur. I think for that, first of all, believe in your client. Lead client or community to discover their needs. Accept the uniqueness in which they are. Uniqueness means it doesn't have to be unique as in, a great person. Uniqueness means that marginalized status, that unfortunateness. Do not speak to him in a kind of a low down knowledge. Speak to him in a knowledge which he understands. Certainly avoid all blaming. Oh, this happened because you were not there at the right time, or nothing else was happening in your life. Also avoid the cause and effect thinking in the whole relationship. And certainly, as I said in the beginning, believe the client, believe that community. And finally, stop diagnosing. I think once we start stopping the diagnosis, in a way, it'll work for us. Finding strengths, I've got about 5 different ways of questions. Some questions I call them survival questions. Some questions I call them support questions, exception questions, possibility questions, esteem questions, I think perspective questions, and also change questions. So let me ask a few questions. How have you managed to survive this far, given all the challenges that you have to live with? Leave that question. He starts telling you his story. A support question. Who are the special people on whom you can depend? Man might say, Parvati, my wife, or my brother in law. Exception questions. When things were really going well in your life, what was different? I remember asking in a child protection issue, when a lady came over to one of our meetings, I asked her the question. I mean, when she came over means we already had the child in custody. She said at that time, grandmother was there. And, Allison was behaving well. So I noted down at some point of time, I need to revisit this grandmother issue. And of course, at a later time, I visited that issue. The grandmother passed away. So obviously, that additional care element was not there. So I need to think in terms of meeting that need. I can't provide a grandmother, but I need to work around a contingency. When people say good things about you, what are they likely to say? I want to know. After all, she's a mother. Her child is in my care. A mother is a mother. Mother loves the child. Something has happened, some domestic violence issue, something else has happened, some drugs issue, the child came into our care. Even if she's drug addict, even if she is violent, she still loves the child. That's the most important issue. Therefore, I'll be thinking in terms of what are those good things about you? And then, of course, I will ask her a perspective question. What are your ideas about the current situation? Don't push people to fatalism. Push people to think about the future. Then the last one, of course, is what has worked in the past to bring a better life for you? There has been some things which have been better, and that would be the way I would ask that question. Yes, Mary, I'm waiting for your question.
Yes, very good, sir. So we have conversed in brief the strength-based practice. My final question would be, what will be the message that you give for our social work teachers and students?
My God, I'm one of you.
Yes.
And, you know, all I can say is obviously you need to rethink where you are, position yourself into social work situation. 30,000 social workers in India. We still think about 2 or 3 people like Medha Patkar, a social activist. 30,000 social workers in India. We still think about a few of you people who are active and looking forward to do something. This tribe needs the tribalism. You need to move forward. You need to be people who will not distance yourself from people. Physical distance, yes.
Yes.
Don't ever social distance yourself. It is important for you to observe the society around. Hundreds of students and hundreds of teachers from India write to me, and I use the word hundreds, and it's real. It's true. When I ask them to think and write an article, they tell me, give me a topic, I will write. Now, that is a tragedy. That means they are not observing the society. If you observe the society, you will have a question. If you have a question, you will have a question and a question and a question and a question. If, as a social worker, you don't question yourself and your surroundings, there isn't anything that you can ever do. You will do a job, you will be a clerk. Even if you're a general manager of a company, you are just one of those persons who is basically doing something for somebody, but you are not doing an act of social work. And I think that's a big message. In all humility, that's all my message is.
Thank you, Dr. Banker. In the words of Marcel Proust, the only real voyage of discovery exists not in seeing new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Today, it's an unprecedented time without clear answers and solutions. Traditional services have been replaced by virtual platforms. Be it pre COVID or post COVID, the mission of social work profession is always the same. We embrace the values of service, social justice, dignity, and work of the person and give importance to human relationships, integrity, and competence. It is time to go back to the foundation of the profession, which is enhancing the human well being and helping to meet the basic needs of all people. Let's join hands as social workers and support the nation in combating COVID 19. Unity is strength. So let's embrace the changes and challenges and learn to live with COVID 19. I thank Dr. Venkat Pulla for a detailed sharing of strength based practice in social work. I hope this session would help us to understand the future of social work in India in the present scenario and post COVID. Viewers, now we come to the end of the session, and Dr. Venkat is ready for your questions. Participants have sent a few questions, and because of time constraints, only a few questions will be answered. We will take the first question. Dr. Venkat, are you ready?
Yes, of course.
Yes, the first question is from Dasharath Rathod. His question says, Sir, how about Indian caste based community to go casteless community?
Good question, Professor Rathod. All I would say is I'd like to hear from you as to what your plan is. I would also like to hear from you as to how do you support that. And, I also would like to see how would you make that you know, into into an agenda for social work. You are out there. I have also talked about it. It's not an easy thing, but each of us needs to start doing it. In other words, it's important. Maybe in the entire social work, you start having a subject, maybe social work, caste, and class interventions. Whatever it is, things which you need to do differently with those things. Education, better awareness. Bring up those kind of things. Have there was, I think it was Professor Pachauri or Dr. Pachauri,
Yes,
IAS, who was just asking a question
yes,
about what
many
would be the role
messages.
of yes from schools and schools teachers and everything.
Full
I
professor.
think there is a huge interaction between social workers, schools, social workers, society, social workers, panchayats, and everywhere else. I think we need to make sure that we make that first attempt. So there cannot be a you know a formula 44 type of like a Vicks mantra or something for your cough and cold. You go ahead and do it in a small place. Make an educational awareness program around caste. Don't go, I mean, you can go right up to annihilation of it, but it possibly may not really become a mantra, you start somewhere. If you're concerned, begin. Don't raise a problem, raise a solution. That's the way I would approach it.
So we have the next question from Minat Jala. The question is, the approach is excellent. How do we propose we work with governance on that?
Yes. Governance. I mean, whose governance? If the government's, you're using the word government's governance, your own governance. What do you do? What have you done in terms of a school of social work? How far have you gone into the community? What's the impact? So if you have impacted in a rural area, that's governance activity. Entertaining, understanding, working with the local structures would be influencing governance. You don't take over the governance. You don't need to. Let's understand one aspect of our life. We are not here to take over the government. Let the government, bureaucrats, Dr. Pachauri, and all those people who have dabbled with this, let them do it. They are past masters at it, and they hold it. That is their prowess. But what we want to do is ensure that they do it in a welfare way, in a way by which our clients, our communities receive what they are expected to receive. And I think that's what we need to be doing. Influencing governance means working collaboratively and sometimes working subversively, working around the things, telling a politician, sir, you won't be elected if you behave like this second time. You might think, what are you going to do? You're not going to do anything, but you're going to go and educate the people that the scheme is meant to be this. Go and ask the politician. I mean, Gandhi used this long time back when he asked all those princely people, the kings and everybody else, what did he ask? Put all your crowns and all those fancy, jackets that you wear and all of your fancy stuff. Become members of parliament for a little while. You'll still remain kings in your counties. We'll give you a small privy purse. Some kind of a thing has to be worked out. So there's a subversive way. Not everybody behaves the same way. There have been some very reformed members of parliament from the kingly families, and some, of course, will still continue to do what they do. So you need to work around an issue, think of the solution, think of what it is going to be, and then work your way backwards.
So we have the third question. It is
Mhm.
from Shantalemi Lisham. How can social work play the role in promoting local production, especially in agriculture and other industries, to curtail centralized system of supply that is sustainable?
Mm. Okay, so I mean, social workers in agriculture and in animal husbandry and those kinds of, you know, uh, interconnected areas will play the role of extension workers, educators, entrepreneurship building workers. Certainly, they do not have that language of agriculture and you know uh, production and economy, but they can learn that over a period of time. There's nothing. There are projects, CSR projects, in which social workers work, and they understand that. And similar way, there are people from you know people who have worked in agricultural extension, one can easily say that there is the community development and community organization and social action and social awareness programs. Those will work very well in those areas, and social workers can be good extension workers, good motivators.
Can we move on to the next question, sir? We
Sure,
have
sure.
uh, two people having a same, it's not a question, it's a statement. We have Pratibha Jain Mishra and Mr. Joel. Their statement is India needs a spiritualized social work.
Yeah.
Could you please answer to that?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't go, what is spirituality? If the person is truthful, if the person is honest, if the person sincerely works towards humanity, if the person selflessly works around, of course, you need to get your pay, you need to eat too. That is one way of expressing spirituality. Be transparent, be truthful, be caring, give a decent burial to the man who is dying. That's your spirituality. You let the man die, you don't worry about him. These migrants are going up and down, they don't have food, and you're not there. That's non spirituality. So, social work and spirituality are very, very close. You can define them. But the other element of the God being there and the demon being there and other kind of things, you don't have to really worry about that. The younger generation, you can catch them by the values and virtues. A spiritual social work would mean inculcating better values, ensuring a virtuous behavior. I think that would do. That would make you move quite a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Venkat.
Yeah.
So we come to the end of the question and answer session. And dear viewers, we thank you for listening. And NAPSWI conversation series will continue with yet another conversation. I thank Dr. Venkat Pulla, Dr. Sanjay Bhatt, and our technical help, Mr. Prashant, for featuring this conversation. Please check the NAPSWI website for the dates and time. I'm signing off. Dr. Mary Angeline here from Nazareth College of Arts and Science, Chennai. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Yes, I,
Yes, sir.
I yes, I do hear somebody else, or it's signing
No,
off.
no. Well, thank you, Professor.